Lancer one might take a redo in future because I did flub some swings. But yeah, today we're going to be doing a Let's Learn of Nova, the tabletop RPG from Spencer Campbell. It is using the Lumen engine of mechanics, which is similar to Apocalypse Dream, relies solely on D6s. And we will be going through this book to a point to learn the base mechanics and learn character creation. And then I have a wonderful table already set up, but I will give an example of what I did to set the table up and also browse through possible alternatives of how to do map making and also how to set up a digital table. Now with that all out of the way, this is Nova, a mecha suit hero TTRPG set in a world where the sun has exploded and shards of said sun have collapsed into Earth. It is made by Spencer Campbell. Here are some more credits, and it uses Lumen. So, just a few table of contents. An explosion of Nova. Nova is a tabletop role-playing game about exploring and rebuilding a world after the sun exploded. With Nova, you and your friends will tell stories of the sparks, brave individuals wearing exosuits fueled by the sun who venture into the dark. Suit up, get your systems ready. Your humanity's last hope of the new dawn. So, I like to compare this game to Warframe, but more grounded Warframe. So no zipping around through space. You're just in a very high-powered, high-tech suit, doing things for your community. So what do you need? You only need D6s. This is one thing I love about the Lumen engine, is it probably revolves around the D6s, and in order to improve your roll of D6s, get more reliant of using more D6s. The more D6s you use, the better chance you have of succeeding. All of the table 2 roles. There is the player, you, and then there is the DM, me. And that's all you need to know. So brief history. The sun exploded. Shock. Its shards crossed the solar system and smashed into Earth and our moon. Humanity was devastated, nearly wiped out. The moon was struck in the sky, a glowing pocket marked beacon of our apocalypse. So the moon pretty much became the sun. 100 years later, we rebuilt. Shards of the sun planted themselves on our surface and cooled. Humanity huddled around these shards, harnessing their warmth and light. And now with the advent of sunwells, we can tap into the near limitless energy. So humanity recovered by using what was used to devastate them. So anywhere where a fragment of the sun landed would probably be a town or a city or something that uses them as a massive power plant, a power battery. And the sparks. We built powerful exosuits fueled by the energy of the sunwell. These suits, sparks, would be sturdy enough to explore the darkness beyond the safety of the sunwell, and powerful enough to defend the humanity whenever it lurks out there. So the sparks are your suits and where you get your powers from. They will probably be the only thing that you can rely upon in the outside world, outside of your communities and outside the safety of your towns. So again, similar to Warframe. So the rules. Again, it can be very narratively focused, where you focus on what players are doing and what is happening around them in the world. So there's no need to constantly roll for perception or persuasion or yada yada yada. It's basically just explaining the narratives and having them explain their actions. And if a roll is needed, then they can roll. The core mechanics is simple. Roll a 1 and a 2, that's a failure. You'll suffer consequences for it. Roll a 3 and a 4, you succeeded, but there's going to be a price. And roll a 5 and a 6, and you succeed. With no consequences whatsoever. I love this mechanic. Not gonna lie, I love it. It's simple, it's to the point. It allows you to still succeed with above a 50% roll. So it's not just a 50-50 chance. Consequences, again, consequences are consequences. I don't really need to explain it. It's something that is going to happen as a reaction to your actions. Whether it be good or ill, something will happen. Or more than one thing will happen. So, attributes. Sparks have 3 separate attributes. We have Sun, which is our power, destructive, and sweeping actions. Brute force and pure muscle. Moon is a lot more elegant and reactive and finesse. And Shade is more practical, patient, and thinking. Or forward thinking. Example of play. Kate is playing a Voyager and scouting as Spark. A scouting class Spark designed to seek and destroy enemies of the dusk. She wants to leap across the chasm, timing when the Lunar Hounds are there. Basically, she wants to jump over a chasm. She's got enough moon to roll 3d6s and rolls a 5 and succeeds. So if you say you wanted to break down a wall with your bare hands and you had enough, like 2 sun, you would roll 2 d6s. Say you roll a 1 and a 2, you don't get through the wall. 3 and a 4, you go through the wall, but the rest more of the wall crumbles and maybe you alert something. And then a 5 and a 6 would be you just break the wall precisely how you wanted it to be with no consequences whatsoever. That's another example. So sparks are your suits, specifically built for tasks and roles. Attributes, they use the sun, moon, and shade, but they also have health, a fuel system for them to use their powers, flight modifications which they can use to modify their passives and their active abilities, and powers that do a similar thing to the flare modifications. Power and fuel. Each spark has a unique power, coming from 2 different types, passive and active. Passive powers marked with P are always in effect. For example, the Pyre's slash passive allows them to deal 1 harm to any close enemy at the start of their turn. Active powers require the spending of fuel to be used. For example, spending 1 fuel per apply to activate the Hunter power. Hurling a flaming spear at a far enemy would cost the fuel. So simple as combat. Rounds and turns. So during a turn, you will have the ability to use an action. An action is anything a spark chooses to do on their turn. An action is typically using a power, but it can also be used for interacting with something in the environment or doing a non-power action. And then you also have the option of moving on your turn, which isn't a strictly measured movement. You would either move either far, near, or close. I think you might be limited to the most you can move is far. So you can't move like miles away. But during a turn, movement allows the spark to move one range unit towards. So you might be limited to only moving once. During a turn, movement allows the spark to move towards away target. Also included pieces of technology. So I was under the impression that you could just maybe sprint as an option. So that's something. So it's either sparks moving 1 range unit, so a range unit could just be the near, far, and beyond. But the ranges we have are 4 range units. Yeah, that explains you can only move 1 unit. So in Nova, there's 4 range units: close, in melee range, a few steps away; near, anywhere near a standing size room; short sprint away. Far is across a large hall or field or down a long corridor. And beyond is even further beyond that, like sniper range. After the sparks have their turn, it's time for the GM to use any NPC's turns, which we limit to the number of players. So if there's 2 players, we will move 2 NPCs at a turn. And then using power. Powers are abilities that are unique to each spark. Each spark has 1 passive power. For active powers, they can activate whichever in combat. To use one of their powers, they have to spend 1 fuel. Cost resolves and any effective flame mods attached to it. Harm and health. This is obviously damage and health. When a character takes harm, it's subtracted from their health. Enemies at 0 are dead, but when a spark reaches 0, they go supernova, which is a special ability that each spark has that triggers when they hit 0. And then after that ability is triggered, that spark is at 0 HP and is considered in a down state, to be revived by an ally on their turn using an action. Because to revive a dormant spark, an ally has to spend their action to bring them back to half health and half fuel. So a spark is not likely to die unless something really, really bad happens or the player chooses it. Here's just a brief example of a turn. So Keegan is playing a pyre. The flame-wreathed Ruthless Hunter spark. A group of enemy lunar cultists have been ignited by Ty's Scorch Sparks. Keegan uses the move to get closer to the cultists, changing their far range to near. Then uses the pyre's finisher ability. Finisher allows pyre to deal 1 harm to every injured enemy within near range. They mark 1 fuel off their character and use that power described as, and then give a good description of how that power is being used, and then end their turn. After each spark has a turn, the GM takes their following actions. So at the end of each turn, we roll for the number of ally enemies that have died to generate loot. So during combat, you would generate drops. So we'd say if 2 enemies died, we'd roll 2d6s, and if it was a 1 to 2, they get nothing. If it's a 3 to 5, they'll get fuel. If it's a 6, they'll get HP. Some sparks have the ability to convert fuel into health and health into fuel, but that takes a flare mod. And then after that's calculated, the fight continues into a new round. So with character creation, which we have to consider when making a character, is choosing a spark. So I believe players are actually expected to change their sparks throughout the game. Maybe. You're not limited to it. Your weapon of war, metal and flesh woven into one. You can find descriptions of these sparks in the following pages. Give yourself a call sign, the name of your squad calls you during missions, and write it in your character sheet. Take a moment to describe what your spark looks like to your squad mate. Every spark begins with a value of 1 in their 3 attributes, so you'd always start off with 1 sun, 1 moon, 1 shade. To program your spark, you spend 4 attribute points to increase your moon, spark, and moon, shade, and sun, moon, and shade. You can't go any greater than 4, but you spend those 4 attribute points along those 3. So like you could go, so if you have 1 in each, you could probably put another 2 in sun to turn 1 sun into 3 sun, another 2 into moon to put 1 moon into 3 moon, and just keep nothing and put nothing else into shade and just have 1 shade. That's an example. And in continuation of that, you have a starting HP of 2 and a starting fuel of 2, but you spend up to 8 points to increase those values and add them to your character sheet. And then you equip flare mods. So each spark has a flare system to modify themselves. Flares are mods that provide ongoing benefits and change the way that your spark's powers work. Just any 2 flare mods and add them to your character sheet. More information about flares on page 29. So we'll get to flares soon. And then your pilot is created. Or you create your pilot. Your pilot is who you are when you're not wearing a spark, not in your spark suit. Describe what your pilot looks like to your squad mates. Write their pronouns and their character sheet. So now we're going to go look at 2. We're going to look at 2 sparks that we're using for the example. So we've got Pyre. The first scouts returned from the scourged darkness of the dust, telling stories of monstrous beasts and horrific cults, and humanity created something to hunt them. The Pyre. Where before we had to run when denizens of the dust would get near, now we can take the fight to them. As a pyre, you deal strong single target damage complementing by high mobility. You have the right trick for every situation as long as it calls for violence. So the pyre's passive / allows you at the start of your turn to deal 1 harm to a close enemy. So at the start of your turn, you will always do 1 damage to someone in the same section as you. And you have your powers, which is a dash, single at a target and charge to them, dealing 2 harm to any enemy at close range, or 3 harm if you moved before that action. So if you've moved to that section where that enemy is, you'll deal 3 damage. If they were already next to you, you'd only be dealing 2 harm. Singed is casting a fiery arc over Solar Blade, dealing 1 harm to all enemies within close range. So it's another close range ability that requires everyone to be in the same section as you, but it deals 1 harm to all of them. Streak across the ground like wildfire, dealing 1 harm to every injured enemy. So your finisher allows you to deal 1 harm to anyone near who has already sustained damage. And then tracer rounds allow you to hurl a flaming spear at an enemy, dealing 1 harm at the start of the next round. You can instantly teleport next to that enemy. So it's a long range attack for far, dealing 1 harm at the start of the next round. Oh, it deals 1 harm right away, and then at the start of the next round you can teleport to them. And your supernova ability, which happens when you go down, is you choose a single enemy at range, any range, move to close range and deal 1 harm equal to your sun and moon. And then we have an example of persistent mods. So these 4 that we see here: Mercenary, Mercury, Hound, Quick Strike, and Retaliation. Retaliate. They're passives that I think are purely stuck to your frame or to your spark. So no one else can have these. But the Fury, Cool, and Wellsprings are mods that you can have that anyone can take. And it's similar for these ones down here. Like, you could take Efficient, which is recommended. So if you tie that to ability powers, basically you have to tie to an ability. So you have to pick a specific ability you've got among these 4 that your power mods are going to be tied to. But they could be something as that ability no longer costs fuel, or the first time you use this ability doesn't count as an action, so it's prepped. Or you can do it so it just does extra damage or has an extra range. So for example, we could put Finder to add an extra range to Singed. So instead of attacking everyone at close range, we could have we attack everyone at near range. And then we have ones that are specific to abilities as well. So you're similar to the dash effect, as well as then dash affects all enemies close to target as well. So we have a dash ability where we single out a target, dealing 2 harm to him. So and then it will just attack multiple enemies. So if we move to close, and then it did the ability, we do 3 damage. Say we moved to section, did that, we did 3 damage to all enemies, not just 2. Alright, and then we'll move on to the next frame, which is one that was a bit tricky for me to figure out for the example. We'll just scroll down. The other character we're going to be looking at who's going to be used for the example is the Drifter. So as technologies of the old Earth, yada yada yada. So this is basically a gunslinging heavy damage spark with the ability of empty clipped. So you pull out the big guns when things get tough. When you have 0 fuel at the end of the turn, you can activate your supernova and gain free fuel after. So a handy trick to this one is you're wanting to go to 0 fuel as quickly as you can. And then you have abilities that help you do this, or that are tied to your fuel. So find the hammer, fire off a flurry of shots in the blink of an eye. Choose a close target equal to the number of your current fuel. So if you had free fuel at the start, you'd spend the fuel and fire 3 shots. I'm not sure whether or not it counts this as after or before you do. So I'm not sure whether or not it would be 3 fuel or 2 fuel. because you spend the fuel before your power, or do you spend the fuel after your power? Each target takes 1 harm, so it's a handy trick to do 8 more damage. Hipfire. Your shot has the sun's fury behind it, dealing harm equal to the sun to the targets within near range. To a target within near range. So a single shot that does high damage. Now that's target, so it's singular. Duel. Single out your full foe and challenge them. Choose an enemy at up to near range. Deal damage equal to your moon. If the enemy survives, inflict their harm to you. So this is a risk reward. If you can one-shot them, you don't have to worry about this. And then take aim. Take aim at those who think they are safe. Deal harm equal to your shade to 1 enemy at far range, or 1 harm to a number of far enemies equal to your shade. So similar to Fan the Hammer, but it's tied to the number of shades you've got. So you can either deal your shades harm to 1 enemy, or deal 1 harm to a number. And then you have Bullet Hell. Fill the with bullets as sunlight. Choose a range, and every enemy at that range takes 2 harm. And which is tied to our passive, which we can do this when we have 0 fuel. We would then get free fuel after. And then we have our similar mods. Now, this is all we're going to look at the moment as I move to our table. So, this is our example table that we're going to be looking at. This table is made using the Foundry V Virtual Tabletop, which is my preferred way of playing tabletop. It does have a Nova module pre-made, but it does not have a compendium. So you will be copying, writing down the compendium yourself, and basically transcribing. But I will now give an example of combat. So this situation here is our 2 sparks. And let me actually just turn sunlight on. Make it daytime, even though we don't have daytime. But our 2 sparks, a Drifter and Pyra, are investigating enemy activity. We were told that we would be dealing with a group of Hellions, but as we arrived at our location, we discovered that the Hellions have already been wiped out, and who are around us now are a bunch of Corvus, just worshipping raven-like folk. We still need to wipe these out regardless, because our task was to wipe out the Hellions, but the Corvus are also a bigger danger. So our 2 players get into position and manage to do so unnoticed, with the enemies, all enemies within near and 1 enemy at far range. And then they begin. So the person who's going to move first is going to be the Drifter. The Drifter who's actually no. Before we do this, we'll mix around this. So we need to add 8 points of health. So I'm going to give this Pyre an extra 4 health. So he is on 6. And an extra 4 fuel. So he's on 6. And then for Sun, he's going to get 2 and 2. 2 in Sun, 2 in Moon. And I've already discussed the flare mods. The flare mods I've got is Pyre or Honed, which gives him 1 harm to his passive ability. And Phase Shift, so his finisher, which he does to all enemies who are injured, is now equal to the number of his moon instead of 1. The Drifter, who's only going to have 1 in fuel, and then the rest is going into his health. And his flare mods I selected is Explosive, so Hipfire deals harm to all enemies close to the target as well. And Solar, which uses Sun instead, that I have connected to his dual ability. So his dual will now use sun instead of moon for damage. Which is also going to be handy because we're going to give him 3 sun, 1 moon, no shade. He benefits greatly from how much sun he has. So yeah, and then we're going to begin combat. So what's going to happen first is Pyre is going to dash through, leap off the mech, and prepare to dash. Is it dash? Yeah. Dash and harm this crow boy here. Now dash singles out a target and charges them towards them, dealing 2 harm to an enemy at close range, or 3 if I've moved. Since I moved, I now do 3 damage, which is enough to kill this enemy. Doing this, he dashes and slashes the crow in half, only to see more of the smaller crow folk appear in its place. Which is an expirability of the ravens. So now we're realizing that he's surrounded by them. The drifter is going to move here behind the cover of these cinder blocks and ready his hip fire. A hip fire shot has the sun, so deal harm equal to sun to targets within near range. So this section here is all near, and equal to my sun. My sun power is now 4, so I could deal. He's now going to deal 4 damage thanks to his mod to all of these targets, wiping them all out in a flurry of blows. And with that, the round ends, and 3 enemies have felled. I didn't count the 2 crows that came from the expire ability. So now, this would be a turn where I get to roll. So I'm going to do 4d6. So now, actually no, I'm not. Yeah, I'll save this place after we've done the enemies' turns. So, as a response, that enemy is going to come here and do 3 harm to Pyre, letting Pyre run free. And also, don't forget to check off your fuel when you use an ability. That's going to be fun to keep track of. So he's done 3 harm and moved. Which is then this Raven boy here is going to do 1 harm to the Drifter. And that's the end of their turns. Now we would move into this. So if I remember correctly, rolling a 6 gives us 1 health. Rolling a 1 or 2 gets us nothing, so 2 of the rolls we got gave us nothing. But we got 2 HP. This HP is going to be distributed to the Pyre, so that puts the Pyre back on 5. So he's healed back to 5. And a new round of combat begins. Now that we're aware that the Raven is going to burst into crows again, Pyre is just going to ignore him and go into this Raven. But oh no, he can't use his passive because of the crow. When the crow wounds someone, it disrupts someone's passive power. So as an alternative, he's just simply going to do dash again, which would do 2 damage and kill him. So similar to again before, when you kill a Raven, you're going to spawn crows. the Pyro was ready for this. So diving back and out of cover, the Drifter is going to take his turn and fan the hammer once again, which did a similar situation to what it did before, wipes everyone out. Now this was a very short example of combat, and combat would actually drift longer. So I might have thrown in more enemies at some point to make things a bit more hectic. But there's still more to go. As now 2 sparks got to venture underground to see what's going on there. They might have dealt with the surface, but now they have to deal with it on the ground. But I'll stop that there, because I only wanted to give a quick example of combat. Quick and simple, to the point. Now, if you notice the map, I did a similar thing to what I did in my Apocalypse Frame video, where I split it into hexes, made the hexes larger, and then built my map around the hexes. So I tried to make sure that each section corresponds to a hex. But another thing that could be done if you don't want to do this is you could just cut your map into sections like this. See, that's just one section here, one section here, and then one section here, and then say this is the map, and like you move from this section to this section is 1 lot, and you can move from this section to this section, which is 2 lot, and kind of section things off that way. That could work, rather than relying purely on hexes. I personally might just work with the hexes. That's always an option that players can take. I think it honestly depends on what the map you're making. Like, because also you can make a map with a lot of high ground. A lot of high ground. But again, after that combat, they would have also killed another 2 enemies. Roll 2d6. And they got nothing for it. But it would seem more like it's a point of, in a scenario, you might have just one map that's got a plethora of enemies and also reinforcements. So say some enemies came up the stairs to deal with the 2 players. Or the players now have to just venture down and then we go to a new map. Maybe it's just an underground system of connected basements that then goes into a tunnel or metro system. But we would use then a variety of different enemies, and maybe then underneath down here there's an elite enemy, similar to the elite enemies of Apocalypse Room. But yeah, I just want to give a simple version of combat, which I hope it was understandable. It's very much a case of go through, do attack. If it used fuel, then it used fuel. If, say, for example, my players wanted to do something with these barrels, which I highlighted, say they want to hurl a barrel at an enemy, or kind of like kick the top off and spray it around, they would kind of like explain like, oh, I want to take this barrel that I'm not sure what's in there and just hurl it at this enemy. I would say then roll Sun. So my Drifter would just roll Sun, rolling 4d6, keeping the highest, 3 with consequences. It was a success of consequences. So say he's hurled this barrel at the cause, but in turn he's also took some damage from the corrosive substances inside. Or say he wants to just deal 1 harm to all the enemies by spraying it around, but he's got himself caught in it as well. So that's the risk reward of it. Or say the Pyro wanted to actually climb onto the roof to get a better vantage point. He would roll that, roll a 6, get total success. So he could probably have made it onto the roof undetected, and maybe being able to pick his square, so he could immediately go into close and have his passive ready. And they could do similar things to that. But the map, I made the map in Dungeon Draft. I didn't have any issue making it. I just wanted to make it into like 4 sections, not super complex, have some terrain around to give a feel that it's kind of like an abandoned area. Place something of a question mark of why is there a giant robot. So if the players wanted to investigate that, they could. And why is the giant robot glowing? Similar stuff to that. Maybe they want to search the Hellions to see, or see if one of the Hellions was alive, to which they could roll a shade. And they find out what the Hellions are. None of the Hellions are actually alive. But also quickly get that there was an explosive device attached to them that then triggers. So they got out safely and no damage. It's very much like that. Now that's Nova. It is on itch.io, and I shall link. Oh, you go there. And now we find out whether or not so I'll link Nova in chat. It's from Gila RPGs. It is currently $20 US. Sadly for everyone, you missed the... Oh no, it was a part of the robot. Get the robot bundle. And also with Nova, there are also a lot of pre-made stories for Nova that I might check out for and use for a one-shot at some point in the future. There is a lot of already pre-made content for this game. Now, let's get to the nitty-gritty of how to run. Again, I have the fallback of I bought Foundry VTT, which I think is the best virtual tabletop service on, but you could easily make something and use it on something like Tabletop Simulator by having everyone just keep the track of their sheets themselves, because the sheets are not that hard to track. Maybe you set up a Google document that has everyone's sheets on, and then you use a Tabletop Simulator for your boards. Or you could do a similar thing with Roll20. Roll20 does not have Nova character sheet support. From what I've seen, Foundry VTT is the only one who has a Nova module, which is why Foundry is the best. But you could easily just work around it by filling in the blanks with Roll20. It's not exactly like a hard thing for you to create. It might take a lot of finicking around because there isn't an inherent character sheet or compendium, and there's nothing that really helps you make the compendium, similar to what Foundry VTT lets you do, where I could just create a compendium and save it, and then do the same thing for all the persistent powers. So if I wanted to add a persistent power and say the mission was complete and I wanted to give him, say, a leak, which reduces his fuel, I could do. So a handy trick for the Drifter is you probably want him to go supernova every single turn. So you're best off putting him on 1 fuel rather than 2 fuel. Or maybe you want to give him more fuel and make his supernova a rare occurrence. Or you want to set something so he doesn't actually spend fuel for anything, you just give him constant efficiency. But I've split these off into like power mods for the power specific ones and passive specific ones. And then you just have your simple ones like efficiency, where an ability will cost no fuel. And things run like that. But yeah, that is Nova. I really love the premise of this RPG and how easy it is to run, similar to Apocalypse Rim. and just how fast-paced it is, it gives a lot of room for people to figure out. Then spend less time on the mechanical nitty-gritty and min-maxing, and more time on the narrative components of a story, which I love very much. While it still has, with the flare system, not a complex method of min-maxing, but there is min-maxing there. But again, similar to Apocalypse Stream, there's no risk of demise for players, which I find as both a pro and a con. If your players feel like there is no danger, then they're not going to feel like anything's great. So like, there's no fear of death for the players. You could kind of expand that to their community. Say if they all get downed on a mission, they're gonna get dragged away, and they have to figure out a way of getting... We'll say capturing is a worse fate than death. So if they all go down, then that works. So that's one way of going around it. Like, your full party wipe would just be a full party down, and you could expand the narrative from there, saying like, say the crows drag these two away somewhere to harvest. Yeah, that could work. That's some interesting enough ideas for that. I might just have a look at because again, there's already some narrative campaigns for Nova, so I might have a look at them and maybe run 1 or 2 of them into the future, or I might do a similar thing for Apocalypse Frame. That's 2 I kind of want to run at the moment, but that's going to be it for this. I'm going to now swap to Victory Bells for a bit. Maybe I could also swap to Metro or swap to another game. I'm not 100% sold on what I'm going to do at this moment in time. We shall see. So you might swap to Victory Bells because I got blessed by the prestige gods. So that's something I can do. Also, I might set up something for the future for the VTuber folk. But yeah, we're gonna close this. Close this. Close all of you. Oh no, I did also get Phantom Brigade. I'm still gonna save Phantom Brigade for a stream next week. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to open BlueStacks. We're just going to pop up here. Ignore the fuckery. There we go. So why aren't you hidden? Is it because VB is actually not? That explains it. Give me a second to get Victory Bells fired up. Just a second.